Hello again, it's your old friend Theta, the Monotone Messiah, and today we're going to be talking about single and double loop learning. One of the hardest parts about being a competitor is trying to figure out what you need to work on, especially given the sort of loose and unprofessional team structures you see in VR esports at the moment. In the name of making that a little easier, I'd like to introduce to you a couple of concepts from the world of cybernetics that you can use to figure out a more intelligent way to make that decision: single and double loop learning. Single loop learning is the type of learning you engage in when you optimize what you're already doing, or in simpler language, you get better at what you're already familiar with. Any single loop learning process is by design not about exploration, and is instead about focusing on what is already known to be exploitable and useful. This is worth your time, as there are many activities in any game or environment which have proven their worth and should be focused on for at least a while. But there's also a trap built into this kind of thinking, because you might end up spending so much energy on doing the same things over and over again that you miss out on a better, more effective approach. That's where double loop learning comes in. A simple explanation for double loop learning is that it's about questioning the entire learning process you're currently engaged in. It's about asking yourself and your team, should time and energy be spent on this at all? And if not, what should we be doing instead? For example, let's say you want to get good at basketball, so you go join a local team. The coach lines you up on the three-point line and tells you to shoot 300 three-pointers. He doesn't tell you how to do them, all he does is hand you the ball and then leaves you to the task. A single loop learning approach would mean following that instruction to the letter and taking these shots without deviating at all. You're just shooting the basketball over and over again, trying to optimize for this one activity, regardless of what it might mean for you in the long run. The implicit assumption built into this activity is that the coach knows what's best and he has your best interests at heart, so you feel no need to wonder if that's the right approach. A double loop learning approach would involve realizing after taking a few shots that you're not quite sure how to complete the task in the best way possible, so you ask the coach for a lesson about how to shoot three-pointers better, or you ask him about how to set up a three-pointer while playing against a real human, rather than just shooting it on your own. You're stepping outside of that single task and working instead on figuring out where that task fits into the bigger picture. The nice thing about both of these learning approaches is that they feed into each other. There are many situations where it makes sense to take a single loop approach and then switch over to a double loop approach when it's become clear that you've hit a point of diminishing returns on that original activity. Once double loop learning has occurred, you start the whole process over again, and on forever. This is why having a coach is so useful. They can save you a ton of time and effort because they give you the guidance to skip a lot of the most useless loops and jump straight to what matters. Of course, this depends on the coach being competent and able to communicate the skill in question in such a way that you understand it and feel confident following their approach. On the other hand, if you don't have a good coach, then you might end up wasting a lot of time and energy on loops that sound promising, but are in fact dead ends. The aforementioned basketball coach who simply tells you to take a bunch of shots and doesn't provide any instructions about how or why you should be doing it is an example of such a coach. Then again, the hard part about being a coach is figuring out how far down the path of progress your players are and providing them with the single loops they need to get better. Maybe that example coach is in the right if the player in question is a professional with a solid three-pointer, but who simply needs to spend more time practicing it. But it'd be completely inappropriate for a newer player who isn't squared away on the mechanics of shooting. This is why, as a coach, I spend so much time with newer players on the absolute fundamentals of the game. Before you can do anything fancy, you need to spend a solid chunk of time executing simple, boring, single-loop learning. Once you do that, the transition to quality double loop learning gets easier for both the player and the coach. For example, many new players get obsessed with details around subjects like loadouts. They'll spend too much time nitpicking the meta loadouts and trying to find something unique within them. But if you don't have a solid grasp of basic concepts like corner management, staying out of open spaces, etc., it doesn't matter what kind of loadout you take. You're going to lose over and over again. On the opposite side of the spectrum, a player with an incredible grasp of the fundamentals can do a lot of damage even with a terrible loadout. If they're a serious competitor, they'll do everything they can to maximize their chances of winning, so they'll take the best loadout possible and not something that makes them feel special. The big difference here is that the skilled player who understands the basics is in a position to start on that double loop learning process of questioning their own loadout choices. But the newer player isn't, and that's why I tell new players to pick a meta loadout and play a ton of rounds with it so they can focus on learning the basics without worrying about those sorts of details. Once they can operate that loadout like it's second nature and use it to execute the most simple, effective movements over and over again, then they'll be ready to move on to a double loop learning scenario. The overall problem is that most players are trying to figure all this out on their own, and not having external feedback can be a serious hindrance to progress. Some people can figure out a lot on their own, but pretty much every player will get better if they have access to someone who can provide objective third-party feedback. In other words, what most players need is someone who can hand them the single loop learning routines that will ensure that they get better. You could say a lot of my channel is a collection of such learning processes designed to help you skip over most of the pain I had to go through when I was first learning how to play. That's also why I started coaching, as I know how hard it is to rise up the ranks without anyone giving you quality information about how you play. My own game didn't develop very far until I started playing with people who cared about my progress and would give me regular feedback. In closing, here's a question I'd like you to ponder. Where have you gotten stuck in your development? Whatever your answer, give asking for feedback from someone else a shot. You never know, one bit of advice might unlock a whole new world of potential for you. That's all I've got for today. Until next time, this is Theta, signing off.